But we also want to discuss something on the policy front, which is important. Now, Sebi proposed amendments to the insider trading regulations, which basically which are aimed at broadening the connected person definition. Sebi has proposed 6 new categories of individuals to be covered under this. The last date for submitting feedback for this was the 18th of August, which is already behind us now. And there's lots of opinion which is coming through. To discuss this and take this forward, we've got Abhishek Dadoo, a partner at Khaitan Co. We also have Sandeep Parekh, managing partner and founder at Finsec Law Advisors. Abhishek and Sandeep, great to have both of you here. Thank you very much for your time. Prashant this side. Sandeep, by the way, we've got both of you, and I broadly know that it's going to be interesting because you're not coming from the opposite ends of the spectrum. We want to debate, but there are important differences in where both of you stand. I want to start with you, Sandeep, because you put it out there. Very interesting column that you wrote. And you basically, the title was Proposed Insider Trading Framework Will Criminalize the Innocent. So why don't you start there? Tell us, what does the insider trading rules right now, what does it cover? And what is being proposed, and why do you say it will criminalize the innocent? Go on.
Yeah. So I think broadly, they've created certain relationships which already existed. So immediate relative, for instance, your parents who are dependent on you. If they trade they've created a presumption, as we lawyers call it, that any trades which were, would be presumed to have taken place because of information you have passed on to them. Now, this immediate and dependent relatives keeps that category quite narrow. And therefore, I think it does cause injustice in specific cases. But be that as may, once you expand it to your uncles and aunts and, whole class of people who are just vaguely connected to you, you may not even be getting along with. And in a case which was actually discussed in the Supreme Court, they were actually fighting with them. And they said, no, you guys are kind of connected to each other because you live in the same house. So, this whole deeming provision creates a lot of, innocent people getting caught up, because how do you disprove the fact that, just merely because you stay in the same house or somebody is your uncle, how do you disprove that the person has not passed on information? Unless you have a camera on your head, it's an impossible standard to fulfill, which means that, even if you trade 500 shares in which your uncle seems to have some connection somewhere, and the connection is they've expanded it not just to relatives, but to vendors also. So if the person's supplying some, tires to a manufacturing car company, that would also be deemed to be insider. So, I mean, it's going to create millions of innocent people will be presumed to be, guilty, and who will find it impossible factually to disprove that they're guilty.
No, got it. So, Sandeep, right now, the insider trading rules cover, the spouse, parents, right, and kids.
Kids.
Right. That's
also qualified by. They have to be dependent. So, if your parents have independent income, then they're not deemed to be.
Okay. So this is the circle, and they have to be dependent on you to qualify and to fall under the. So now what these new regulations are saying, and you say it in your article as well, they're taking relatives as defined under the income tax law. Right? That's essentially what you're saying. So it kind of covers a much larger universe of people who suddenly will fall under these regulations.
Yeah.
Oh, there is no dependency as well.
That's right. So if I'm actually physically fighting with my uncle in a court of law, I'd still be kind of connected to that uncle.
Okay. And you could sort of end up in a mess because of these new regulations, right?
That's right.
Potentially.
And think of it this way, right? It's like I've said in the article, it's going to not just have 100% false positives, it will also have 100% false negatives. Because how many people who are really criminally minded are going to trade through their uncles, right? So it's only going to catch the innocents, and it's not going to catch any guilty person.
And I'm assuming that you've sort of sent in your feedback as well, right? I mean, the 18th of August was that last day. Let's get an Abhishek as well, who's looked at this, who's written about the insider trading regulations in the past. Abhishek, you heard Sandeep. I know you've read that article. Your first thoughts, and you've also sent in responses. on this matter to SEBI. Where do you stand, and what's the way forward? How should these be evolved? Because we're at that stage now where, after looking at all the consultation, etc., SEBI is going to come up with something. Go on.
Thanks, Prashant. So I think what SEBI is really trying to do is cast a wider net. I agree with Sandeep to the extent that maybe they're overreaching here because there are certain parameters, for example, the financial dependence or the consultation to take a trading decision. Those aspects have been done away with. And those are key to differentiate between people who are reliant on connected persons to take a trading decisions. So what is key here is to keep in mind that the earlier regulations had a gap. So for example, if the earlier regulations only covered, for example, your wife and your wife's spouse, it did not cover the spouse's siblings, right? So this really takes it to one level further, which to my mind is logical. But what they also need to do at the same time is to maintain that financial connection or that consultation concept which existed in the earlier regulations. So all in all, what this is trying to do is block a few loopholes, which I think it will be successful in doing. But at the same time, it cannot afford to cast such a wide net where innocent people are also needlessly getting dragged in to insider trading situations.
So you're saying the wider net is good, but just bring in that clause of dependency. And that'll do it. Abhishek?
Correct. That's right. Because the idea, so the earlier regulations, so there are two key changes. Earlier, the regulation said that it needs to be an immediate relative, that is one. And along with immediate relative, you had to satisfy two criteria, which were mandatory. The first criteria was that you either had to be financially dependent on the connected person, or you had to consult the connected person to take any trading decisions. This establishes that there is a true connection between these two people, either financially or in terms of consultation. What SEBI's proposed now is they have substituted immediate relative with relative, which is casting a wider net. But at the same time, they've removed those two conditions of being financially dependent and consulting for a trading decision. So to my mind, the first one is fine because you need a wider net. Immediate relatives just doesn't cut it. You can have one more layer, that's okay. But the second part, where you're removing the financial dependence, that doesn't work. That needs to be retained.
Okay, yeah, that's a very valid point. And I think it was a point well illustrated by Sandeep as well, that you could be, fighting with those relatives on a separate matter for all you know, but just because the financial dependency aspect is not being taken into account, you are connected. And therefore, there could be, implications, legal implications there. Sandeep, aside of this issue, is there anything else? Because in June, I believe, there was a little bit of watering down as well, and at least from a management perspective, there was this whole concept of coming out with a trading plan, which you can then share with your compliance team, and once they okay it, then you can look at trades. So apart from this issue of family members getting implicated, is there anything else in these regulations which sort of doesn't cut it with you? And also the timelines we're looking at, by when can responses go in, and when is the final outcome expected, or the final regulation expected?
So, people can send in their comments. Typically, they do take comments after the final date, so that's fine. Anybody who wants to send comments, before the board meeting, they will usually consider all the comments that they received. So that's fine. And does it go beyond relatives? Yes. I think they've created a much wider category, including vendors. Like I said, you're supplying tires to a car manufacturer, you consider it to be a deemed insider.
But do you think, Sandeep, do you think they will, that is the intent? Or do you think...
So to put it very bluntly, the intent is for the regulator to not do his job, right? So everybody is a criminal, now you come here and disprove it. So it's actually very sad because no other country in the whole world has this scheming kind of provision.
Let me ask Abhishek on this vendor point, because Sandeep's point is it casts a much wider net. It's not just relatives. Is that how you read it as well?
That's right. I mean, look, the wording is wide, but I'll go on the intent there again. I don't think the idea would be to go after every Tom, Dick and Harry for no rhyme or reason. There has to be smoke for there to be fire. right? So the idea is you cast a wider net, draft the regulations widely so that you can capture perpetrators. But
Right.
in that process, there will be innocence which sort of come into the fray, which needs to be avoided. I mean, I'm fully aligned with the thought process that you cannot have regulations where innocents are needlessly getting caught. So that can be fixed in the nuance.
Yeah, no,
But the
got it.
idea here is not to catch your vendors or such.
Yeah, no, but yeah, point taken. But the only thing is, I think as Sandeep is saying, the intent is not there, why put it, right? Make it very clear. Let there be no doubts in that sense. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure. It's an important topic, and we'll come back to this as and when there are more developments. And Sandeep, when you write next, thank you very much for joining us. Abhishek, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18 as well.